Hello, and a very good evening, everyone. This is Stand Up for Yourself, the fifth episode, back again. And today we are joined by John McGraw, all the way from Canada. Welcome, John, to the show.
Thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure to be on the show, Iman.
Most definitely. So, Stand Up for Yourself is basically a show that I have created to help anybody really who struggles with speaking English, who finds it challenging to speak in English, to really stand up for yourself and start speaking, because there is a wonderful world out there waiting for you with plenty of opportunities if you are able to speak English. So that's what it's all about. Right. So, John, why don't you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and what it is that you do?
Sure, absolutely. I'm a business English coach for Japanese professionals. So, what I do is I help Japanese professionals thrive in global companies and work abroad by coaching them with their English communication skills. I run my own English coaching business and I work one-to-one with my clients to help them reach their goals.
So at the moment, are you in Japan or you're in Canada right now?
I'm actually in Canada right now. So
Well,
as you can imagine.
How's that working now with your coaching?
That's a very good question. Well, of course, obviously, there's a fairly significant time difference between between Toronto, where I'm at, and Japan. Right now, there's a 13-hour time difference. However, with my clients, we're able to work out usually times because, of course, during the day, obviously, in weekdays, they're at work most of the time. So it's a case of just either working out something where they learn early in the mornings for them or later in the evenings for them, which just ends up being the morning for me. So, it works out quite well, despite the time difference. And it's quite good.
Yeah, awesome.
No problem.
Awesome. Mm-hmm. Right. So what I would like to share with everybody, what caught my attention about what John does is that in Malaysia, there are some people who have this notion that the Japanese do not really accept or embrace English. Hence the question of why can't we be like the Japanese and just use our native language? Because there's still that belief that the Japanese only hone their native language. So when I saw your profile, I'm like, this is clearly not the case anymore. Clearly not the case anymore. So before we get to your experience, how did you get there from Canada all the way to becoming an English business coach for the Japanese? How did that happen?
Okay, well, that's a bit of an unusual journey that I took because, to be honest, when I was younger, I didn't have any particular ideas that I'm going to be a teacher and I want to teach English in another country. In fact, when I was younger, I wanted to be an actor. I was an aspiring actor. So the question is, how do I come from that to where I am now, being an English coach? Well, I found I enjoyed acting, of course, when I was in school, and I moved to Toronto, which is, of course, the largest city in Canada, to pursue that. And as you can imagine, pretty much as you would know anywhere, acting is a very difficult field, a very competitive field. And it's very hard to make a lot of money until you become quite famous, for example. So I had to do a number of jobs to support my, as I call it, my acting habit at the time. I did sales. I worked as security for a condo building. I worked as an usher for a theater at a live space. And I found after a while, I realized that although I enjoyed acting, I didn't have a passion for it.
Right.
In the sense of that I'm willing to suffer and take all sorts of rejection, as you can imagine, in auditions and everything to do it. And I thought, there's something else. There has to be something else out there that I can do. And that was when I found out that there was an opportunity to teach English conversation in Japan. There are a number of private English conversation schools in Japan. And in fact, many of them have recruiting offices in different parts of the world. And there were a few offices actually here in Toronto. So I heard about those. And the requirements were quite low at the time. You had to be a university graduate, of course. But as long as you were a university graduate, you could apply. for a position to teach English conversation. So I thought, you know what, I'll give it a try.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe go abroad for a year or so, see how that is. I
Mm-hmm.
applied, I got a job. And
Mm-hmm.
then the next thing I knew, I moved to Saitama, which is a province just north of Tokyo. And
Okay.
I was working in Saitama. So that's how I ended up started off with that.
What year was that, roughly?
That
What year?
was in, oh, hello, that was in, I'm not sure if you're still there, but that was in 2005. Uh, so you still there? Okay. All right. I continued with the story. So
2005. Okay.
yes, so I was there in 2005, and so I started there in 2005 in Saitama. I
Mm-hmm.
originally planned to only be there for a year.
Mm-hmm.
I stayed for 7 years. And
Okay.
yes,
That's great.
and
That's really great.
yeah. So
Right.
while I was there, oh, sorry, you can go ahead. Or,
It's okay. It's okay.
okay, so I started
While
with
you
at that conversational school.
mm-hmm.
I stayed there for a couple of years, and then I decided to get some more formal training while I
Yeah.
was in Japan. So
Mm-hmm.
I got my CELTA certificate and moved on to teaching English in-house at a few companies, a few
Mm-hmm.
business corporations, being their in-house teacher of English. And then for the last few years that I was in Japan, I taught university students at Waseda University in
Right.
Tokyo, which is
Mm-hmm.
one of the biggest and oldest universities in Japan.
Wow.
That's where, yeah.
That's
Mhm.
awesome. You it means you left for Japan back in 2005. So that's meaning to say that they have started to expose their countrymen to the language quite far back already. It's not recent. It's not something new. They've been working on it for quite a while now. The last time I was in Japan was in when I was 14. So that's easily 15 odd years ago, maybe, if my math is right now. When I was there, everything was still in Japanese. I mean, they didn't have anything translated into English or anything like that. Is that available now? Are there translations, or are still things all still in Japanese there?
I think particularly in the larger cities like Tokyo, there's more English
Right.
on the train signs, for example.
Right.
So English is becoming more prevalent, and obviously, as you can imagine, in preparation for the Olympics
Yeah.
at the time, there was a lot,
Yeah.
there was a significant expansion of English signage and English other forms of English guidance for in the guests that they were assuming they were going to get at the time.
Yeah.
But even prior to that, there had
Mhm.
been more. There's been a slow expansion of English in a number of areas. They understand that
Mhm.
it's a it's it right now it's the most prominent global language
Yeah. Yeah.
for business and everything else. So I think they realize how important that is.
Yeah. So
Mhm.
they've evolved. Clearly, they have evolved. They're no longer in that nutshell of they just need to know and write and speak Japanese, but they have clearly evolved. Awesome. Right. Before we go to the next question, I'd like to hit the comments. We've got a comment here from Nazrik Eddie. He says, "Hi, hello, Iman and John. Happy to be here. We're happy to have you. Nazrik, thank you so much for joining. When we have more comments, we're going to hit that again. Right. So, do share with us, what did you discover during your time coaching and teaching the Japanese to speak English?
Well, there were a number of things I learned about the English and English ability of the typical Japanese person when I was there. I found that they can, in terms of reading and writing,
Mhm.
many of them can read and write reasonably well. Where they're really lacking is speaking and listening abilities. Now, I
Right.
mentioned, yeah, because I had worked at an English, specifically an English conversation school, was where I started
Mhm.
out. The reason why those are so popular is because the school system at the time, and I believe to some extent it may still do this, the school system focused a lot on older ways of learning, grammar translation, for example.
Right.
And the focus was really on learning the English you need to prepare for entrance exams for the next level
Yeah.
of school. So because
Mhm.
in Japan, certainly they have entrance exams, sometimes even as low as junior high school, high school,
Right.
university. And there's always an English component. But of course, on those exams, there is no speaking component. It's all
Yeah.
writing and reading.
Yeah.
So there's very little focus on actual learning the language specifically to communicate. It's more about
Right.
learning it to pass these exams.
Yeah.
So that's what I found a lot in that case of their abilities, which is why those conversation schools are so popular.
It does sound very similar to what is happening here in Malaysia, to be honest, because the English education system in Malaysia also does focus a lot on getting the students to pass the exams, and therefore there's a lot of emphasis on
Mm,
writing, learning the grammar, um, writing down notes, copying the
right,
sentences from the textbooks or from the board or from what the teacher shares. So even when I was in school, there was a lot of that. So if
right.
because I was an active student, so I would find any opportunity to speak. But if I'm not that kind of a student, the opportunity wasn't really there for me to take, because it was always
Exactly.
exam driven. It was always the teachers would have to complete the curriculum in order to be able to make sure exams are passed and things like that. So it sounds very similar to what's happening in Malaysia, really.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm sure that if they're not students like you were, where you understood the value and you took the time to work on it yourself, it's almost seen by probably a lot of the students as something that's negative because it's connected to
Yeah.
exams and things, and it's not actually seen as this is a means of communication. Of actually
Yes,
learning about other cultures and connecting with people from around the world. It's just
that's true.
this is what I have to do to get through school, and yeah,
Yes,
certainly.
exactly.
Hmm.
And would you agree with me to any extent that learning the English language, by learning the grammar first, learning the technicality of it first, does make it tough? Does it can come across as a difficult language compared to learning to understand it and then learning how to use it in writing or in any other parts of life, it becomes tougher to know the grammar first rather than knowing how to use it first. Would you
Yes,
agree with me?
I 100%. I would completely agree with you. The problem is that when you're focusing on things like these mechanics
Mhm.
about the mechanics of a language, it's just this kind of abstract concept of well, okay, maybe math not is not an abstract concept necessarily, but it's sort of like trying to make it similar to mathematics where you just study these equations.
Yes,
And that's not how language
yes,
works. I
correct.
think that the purpose when you're learning anytime you're learning a language, you have to understand why are you learning it. You have to have a purpose in mind.
Yeah,
And what that purpose could be, it could be just as simple as I want to be able to talk about movies that I like with
yeah,
friends, or in a business situation, I want to be able to negotiate
that's true.
deals. And what you do is you need to learn, okay, this is what I want to do in this language. Okay, so how do I do that?
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
Rather than going and learning, okay, we're going to learn I'm going to study conditionals today. No, it's not about studying conditionals.
Yeah,
It's I want to be able to make offers. Okay,
correct.
so how do I make offers? And then you learn, if you need to, you learn the grammar that helps you to do that. But
Hmm.
studying, going into classes and saying, oh, today we learned the present perfect. No, today we learned how to tell a story. I think
Yes,
and I think there's more understanding that task-based approaches are more effective, meaning focusing on what you have to do with the language and what you want to do with the
yes,
language instead of
yes,
just what's this grammar.
correct.
It's
I agree
exactly.
with you. I do
Yeah.
agree. That's really great sharing to really understand that understanding the language, the intricacies, why you use it, how you use it, has to come first before we then learn how to get it right. Because then there's that familiarity. We know what it's about. We know how to use it. Then we're just going through the process of fixing whatever that needs to be fixed. Like you said, the mechanics. But it shouldn't be the other way around. That's
No.
really awesome. Um,
Yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, okay. I was just going to say I've used an example of in the past, and I think I've posted about this on LinkedIn. Is sort of the and comparing learning a language to riding a bicycle. right? And I've done
Yeah.
polls on this. I'm not sure if you've seen that post, but I asked the question is like, okay, so when you learn to ride a bicycle, what do you do? Do you read a manual on how to do this?
Yes.
Do you study tapes, or do you just get on the bike, ride, fall down a bunch of times, and eventually learn how to
Yes.
do it? And of
Yeah.
course you do that, and I feel
Precisely.
that that's the same way with the language. Is just you go ahead, you make mistakes, you learn, and that's how you learn, because then it becomes part of you, as opposed
So
to
true.
focusing on a lot of abstract studying all the time. So
I love that example. So if anyone out there is listening and you're not sure why we're saying, or you're trying to make sense of why we're saying speak the language first before learning the grammar or the technical parts of it or the mechanics of it, it's just like riding a bicycle. You have to ride it and then you get the hang of it. You fail, you fall, you make mistakes, and then you kind of get the hang of it after that. That's amazing.
exactly.
And I love how you mentioned that the Japanese have specific schools, English conversation schools. So it's really specifically to help the Japanese converse in English, speak in English.
That's
So
right.
that's
Yes.
maybe we should have something like that in Malaysia. I don't know. Maybe
Possibly.
that would help. Yeah. Awesome.
Possibly. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm gonna really quickly hit the comments again. We've got Keanu Chiu, who says hello, Iman. Hi, Keanu. And Atika is a friend of mine. She says, yeah, I remember memorizing my essays since I was in Form 4, correct, and improved the same essay for nearly 2 years. Sit for SPM, get A plus for English, but still cannot converse properly and confidently after SPM. So this is a very, very typical scenario in Malaysia where we are even fed how to write
Right.
and remember how to write
Right.
it. And then make sure you get the A. But then again, yeah, when we're writing, we're not speaking. And I just posted about this today on my LinkedIn, as my LinkedIn post, where when we are writing, it's very low risk. So we can learn it, we can copy it. But when we speak, we have to practice and put ourselves out there and take that risk in order for us to
Yes.
then gain that confidence to speak. That's amazing. Thank you
Exactly.
for sharing that, Atika. And
Yeah.
we've got a LinkedIn user who says, very interesting, John. I'm so sorry. Your name doesn't appear. So it only appears as LinkedIn user. And Keanu goes on to say, riding a bike is a good analogy. Exactly. Yeah. In
Yeah.
life, most of the things that we do by trying first, falling, failing, making mistakes, and then we learn from those mistakes.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Failure. What is it? The pathway to success is just littered. It's paved with failures. You have to
Correct.
fail.
Yeah.
Failure is part of the process.
Yes, it's part of life. That's true.
Yes.
That's amazing. Thank you very much, everybody, for your comments. So I would like to know, can you share with us, was there any resistance? Were the Japanese all ready to accept, especially your students, or was there any resistance?
That's a very good question. In my circumstances at the English Conversation School, most of them were quite open, but there was resistance. Occasionally, in that case, it was usually with students who didn't understand the value or didn't have any sort of intrinsic motivation in understanding what was in it for them. So, for example, maybe students who were taking it as part of in Waseda, for example, students who had to take the conversation class as a compulsory course, or in the conversation schools, sometimes business people who are told by their companies, okay, that you need a certain level of English, and but they didn't really feel it themselves.
Right.
So I did encounter that occasionally. What I did find, of course, was once they understood what was in it for them, then their motivation significantly increased. So, for example, the students who realized that it gave them an opportunity to, if they studied abroad, that having that level of English would enable them to make friends and connect with other people. And of course, the professionals who realized, oh, well, if my English is improved, I'll have more opportunities if they send me overseas, and I could maybe move into a managerial role, because of course many Japanese companies have subsidiaries and branch offices around the world. And in those places, they can't just use Japanese alone.
It's true.
So yeah, I found that really that it's understanding what's in it for them overcame that resistance.
Again, I like that so much. They start off without having any intrinsic motivation, and then they turn around once they realize what's in it for them. So the big why, even in this case, even though it's language, it's not like a life changing thing that's going on, but understanding our big why is it important to us? Why is it important to know the language, to be able to speak the language confidently? Understanding that why can make a difference in how it's
Exactly.
accepted, in how it is learned, even, and in terms of what we're willing to do to really master the language. So that's really awesome. So we do have to know why we're doing it, the reason behind
Exactly.
doing it.
Yeah. If you're just doing it because someone's told you that you have to do it and you can't understand why, you can't become, you're
Yeah,
only going to reach a certain level. So you have to
yeah,
understand, you have to have a reason. Once you have a reason and you're motivated, it makes such a difference in learning. It really does.
it's really amazing.
Yeah.
Again, the same thing that happens here, which is what I relate. I found what you do so relatable, and I was totally immediately drawn to get in touch with you, because it's the same thing that happens here in Malaysia as well. Because of how generally at schools we are taught to learn English to pass exams, there's no helping us understand why it's important, how it can be important, how it can be used after graduating, how it can be used beyond school. It's always just get the A to get into university, get the A to get the chance to study abroad. So it's always
Right.
get the A, but it's never
Hmm.
learn the language, study abroad. You get to speak to many people. You get to broaden your horizon. It's never that. It's always get
Right.
the A, and so that you can go.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if people who don't get any other exposure to the language, then they grow up and end school with that mentality that I get the A and I can do everything else. But then what happens here in Malaysia really is when the students graduate, especially from college or university, they find it difficult to get jobs, even in the country. I'm not even saying
Hmm.
go outside, go abroad and get a job. But even in the country, they find it difficult to get jobs because there are so many multinational companies. There are many, even government companies or government linked companies that realize the importance of English, and they want that skill in their new hires, because they know that they want those new hires to be able to take the company somewhere, take the organization further. And a lot of these graduates are actually losing out on jobs, mainly because they are not able to speak confidently. And you know what's interesting is most companies are not even looking for new hires who speak perfect English. They're just looking for someone
Yes.
who can speak the language, confident enough to speak, and then, of course, improvements would happen along the way. So, what do you feel is most important when it comes to English, learning English, or even speaking English? What's more important, perfect English or the confidence to speak?
Well, perfect English, since it doesn't exist at all, I would say being understood is the key. Uh, I mean, perfect English. I guess the question is, what is perfect English? Is it American English? Is it
Mm-hmm.
British English? Is it
Mm-hmm.
Canadian, Australian? And even there, are okay. Which is it? Received pronunciation? Is it Singaporean English? What is it? There's so many varieties of English, but the one thing
Yeah.
that they have in common is that we can understand each other
Mm-hmm.
for the most part, right? Except for little idioms and things like that. So we need to. So when you're learning English, you need to focus on being understood.
Yeah.
That's all that matters, and it doesn't matter about having perfect grammar, perfect uh, perfect usage of vocabulary doesn't matter. At times, I English was the language I
Yeah.
grew up with, and I always sometimes even right now I'm having trouble thinking of the exact perfect words to use, anyways. But
Yes.
still communicating, still
Mm-hmm.
communicating, and so that's all that the employees or employers really want is their employees who, as you said, who are confident enough to speak and can learn along the way, because learning the specific vocabulary for that particular job, that can always happen as part of it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're too afraid to speak,
Yeah.
and they'll pick this up in the interview, that you're not a confident speaker, obviously that's going to limit your opportunities.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I want to say probably in Japan, and I'm sure it's the case in Malaysia as well, with so many global companies, multinational companies like
Yeah.
Amazon and so on that are opening offices everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
English is necessary to communicate
Mm-hmm.
because you're communicating with people from all around the world, and
That's
they
true.
just want someone who's understandable, and they're not going to care if you have, if you occasionally put on an S where it shouldn't be, or leave off the
Yeah.
S where it shouldn't be, as long as they understand it, right? And that's the key. Absolutely.
That's so amazing. Um, I do remember you sharing about what you discovered on LinkedIn's Clubhouse about the proficiency of some of the Japanese you met there. Tell us a bit about that.
Yes. Yes, it was quite interesting because I had found I'd gotten onto Clubhouse. Well, of course, it's a very new thing. It only started just within the past year,
Mhm.
and I decided to get on just to explore and see what there was out there. I got into some groups where it was mixed about Japanese English exchange, and I found some Japanese, particularly some young ones who spoke English at an extremely high level. And it was
Right.
interesting to the point where when some of them spoke, they almost spoke with, say, a sort of a typical American accent.
Uh-huh.
And I'd thought, okay, well, you must have spent some time growing up overseas. And they said, oh no, I've never left Japan. Never left Japan.
Wow.
Only been in Japan. And that blew me away. So I think, those kind, and so yes, there are more Japanese that are understanding, and
Yeah.
their parents are understanding and getting them to learn English at an early stage because they realize how important that is, how important a skill it is. Yeah.
What this sounds like to me is that the Japanese, the world is basically realizing the importance of English and really accepting it, embracing it,
Yes.
and
Yes.
preparing their people to be able to speak, to just use it as a tool or a mechanism to
Yes.
move forward or to get ahead within the country, beyond the country. Um, more and more countries are really realizing that English is important and English connects and can take
Yes.
place.
Yes, and there's one thing I want to add to that is that I think that they realize, as you said, that it's a tool to get
Mm-hmm.
elsewhere. So it's not a replacement for your identity, as
Yes, it's
exchanging
not.
your identity. It's in
Yeah.
the case of the Japanese who are speaking this, it's not that they are becoming British or American in
Mm-hmm.
terms of and copying exactly the idioms and
Mm-hmm.
the pronunciation. They're realizing it's a tool because especially in recent years, well, English has become a lingua franca, and it's
Yeah.
not really owned by anyone,
Yeah.
right? It's not owned by me. It's not owned
Mm-hmm.
by any other native speakers. I've heard figures that there are something like 400 million native speakers in the world, and there are about 2 billion non-native speakers.
Mm-hmm.
And so the 400 million, we don't have any ownership over it, so there
Yeah.
shouldn't be any concerns about, oh, I have to sound exactly like the queen when I speak,
Yeah.
or I have to sound like this Hollywood actor. That's ridiculous. There's no point in that. It's and most people don't care. They just want to be able to understand you, and
Yes.
and that you can understand them. That's really all that's important, and it's a tool. It's not a replacement for your national
Yeah.
identity, so you can still be a proud
Mhm.
Japanese person, you can be a proud Malaysian, proud person, whoever you are, and have this as an extra tool to help you
Yeah.
communicate. Yeah. In some ways,
I
I'm
love
kind of
how you
jealous. Sorry, I was
sometimes
just going to
quite
say
jealous.
I'm kind of jealous because okay, I have an advantage because I grew up with English as my first language, but it's kind of I'm having this and all this time learning other languages to feel connected, whereas all of these non-native speakers
Yeah.
have their specific cultural identity, and then they
Mhm.
also have English as an extra tool. So I find that quite interesting. Yeah.
What I like most about what you said is how English is not a replacement to our identity. It's a tool. It's a tool that we use to speak, to just put ourselves out there. It always revolves around the same thing. When we have English, we can speak to more people. I'm actually even preparing for a talk with a group of students that's happening about 2 Saturdays from now, and I kind of did a very quick research on Google. I researched how to learn English in. I mean, I typed in English, how to learn English, and there were like 26 million results. And then I typed the same thing in my national language, Bahasa, which is cara belajar bahasa Inggris. It's literally how to learn English in Bahasa. And
Okay.
there was only like 15,000 um, uh, results. So even in that context, if we can search in English, there are more things that we can read. Of course, we're never going to click all the way to page 35, but it just shows that there are so many resources out there in
Yes.
English that
Yes.
just gives us a variety of take what you want, read what you want. It's
Yes.
limitless, completely limitless.
Yes, that actually
That's
reminds me of
amazing.
of another situation that I had with uh, with a student I spoke to recently. She is an IT intern at an IT
Mhm.
company, and she is Japanese, and she realizes the need for English because the amount of information about
Mhm.
IT is very limited in Japanese as compared to how much is available in English. So
Yeah,
she said that she wants to improve her English comprehension just so she can access all of that information.
yeah,
And it's it's just there's so much more out there in English because
yeah.
of and most people are sharing it in English, even if their
That's true.
first language is something else. Yeah, so I totally see that the parallels there.
That's so true. You've given me an idea to just kind of research how many books are normally translated to English, just so that it can be circulated worldwide, whether on the web or physical book, doesn't matter. But I'm gonna look
Mhm.
that up. I've never thought of looking that up, but it would be interesting to have that number, that data of how
Yeah,
many books written in other languages that are actually translated, so that it can be accessed by more people around the world. And like,
yeah, you have to tell me that
yeah,
number.
if I have a book originally written in German, it's not going to be translated to Bahasa Melayu first. It's not going to be translated to Spanish first or Japanese first. It's going to be translated to English first, and then someone from that country might translate it to the national language. But it always goes to English first, because that would be the language generally understood worldwide. Really amazing sharing. Thank you so much. I'm going to hit the comments. We've got a number of comments that have come in.
All right.
We've got one by Yasuki Takami, motivating myself constantly to for going further. Good point. Exactly. Yeah,
Hi,
self
Yasuki.
motivation, intrinsic motivation. Atika continues to say, "Yep, still improve. Yep, it's a journey, right, John? It's not something that I'm good at it. I've become good at it today, and then that's it. I wash my hands and I'm done. No,
Exactly.
even for me,
You
I'm still improving. I'm still learning new words, still learning new things about the language. The journey to learning it continues. It never stops, really, does it?
exactly. No, it never does. It's a lifelong journey.
Yeah,
I'm still learning Japanese, and I don't think I'll ever stop. So
yeah,
it's the same thing. And I'm still learning English words every once in a while because there's
yeah.
so much English out there, and I'm an English coach. So yeah,
So we too have to upgrade ourselves. We cannot be stagnant with just what we know, because then we are also imparting the knowledge to someone else. So we need to up our game as well. We need to keep
absolutely,
knowing more and more things.
absolutely, yes.
Amazing. So Liana Haley says he's right. Okay, I'm not sure which part, so I'm assuming she's saying you're right in everything that you're saying right now.
I'll
So
take
she's
that.
saying
That works
right.
for me.
So this is LinkedIn user. I believe this would be Liliana. I think this is Liliana. She says
Okay.
imperfect English still gets your point across. Exactly.
Hmm.
Communicating your ideas is more important than using perfect grammar. The perfect
Yes.
grammar will come. The more we
Yes.
speak, through the mistakes, through the listening, eventually we would get it right. Right?
Yes.
So Atika says that she agrees, can't agree more. Liliana, and she goes on to say, exactly, when I start to use English daily, I start to read more English books. Love the variety of my reading nowadays. It gives me more ideas and more exposure. Okay, Haley's got a question for you, John. Did the Olympics, prior or otherwise, change their perspective on the English language? I like that. Did it?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, of course, as you know, I wasn't in Japan at the time of the Olympics or even prior to that, but I certainly from people that I've known there, they understood how important English was. Certainly, in just being able to accommodate all the millions of people that they were expecting and
Mm-hmm.
realizing that. So I know that there were attempts to change, for example, the street signs. Or
Mm-hmm.
adding more information about street signs. It's a bit of a long story, but basically the way the mapping is for many streets are not actually named. There's a different address system, which could take a whole other
Oh,
program to explain. But
okay.
basically, there was so we won't get into that. But in the sense that there was a need for more street signs and also street signs that had English on them, so
Mm-hmm.
that people could understand where they were and navigate more easily. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
Mhm.
it could have. We're not sure, but it may have triggered that
Yeah.
need as
Well,
well.
I think it certainly, yeah, it certainly did, and there were some visible cases of that where I heard
Mhm.
about it through friends and so on, that was happening, and more services,
Yeah.
navigation services on phones, for example, that were more English, right?
Yes.
With more English on them. So certainly, yes, I would say it did.
Awesome. Thank you for the question, Haley. Okay.
Hmm.
That's pretty much it. So now, John, I would really like to tap on some of your Japanese.
All right.
Okay.
Okay.
So let's see if you can make me trilingual. Because I
I'll
speak
do my
Bahasa
best.
as my first language. I speak English as my second language. Let's see if I can, you can make me trilingual for the next in 5 minutes.
I'll do my
Um,
best. I'll promise. I'll let you know that, of course, I'm not a Japanese teacher, but I'll do my
yeah.
best. With the limited
Okay.
Japanese that I have. Okay.
Right. So you have taught me a few things. So I'm gonna give this my best. Okay. So the first thing I'm gonna say to you is nice to meet you. I am
Yes.
Iman and let's have good relations. So I'm gonna try and say this in Japanese. Okay. So
Okay.
hajime mashite, watashi wa Iman desu. Yoroshiku onegai shimasu.
Nicely done. Nicely done.
Yay!
Yes. Nicely done. Yes. And so I would say, of course, back to you. Hajimemashite, John desu. Watashi wa Yon desu. Yoroshiku onegai shimasu. So.
Now you make me sound like a robot.
I've had a little more time to practice, I think so.
Of course. So, you know what? You know how this is again. How this is so cool in the sense where John has been speaking Japanese at least since 2005. I have always only known konnichiwa, arigato. So, having learned how to say hajime mashite in the last just 15 minutes, it shows that it takes time. It's not something that can be taught and immediately processed and immediately make us become good at. It's something that we have to keep practicing. So yeah, you. Thanks for making me sound like a robot, but okay, all right. So, all right. So I would like to say to you, John, that I would like to say to you that I want to learn English. Okay, I
Okay.
want to learn English, and so I would say, ego manabitai. Is that right?
Yep.
I want to learn English. Ego manabi. Sorry, ego manabitai.
Yeah. So ego manabitai.
Ego manabitai.
Yeah, yeah. So it's a little
Nice.
tricky. It's like, yeah. So we got ego o manabitai. There we go.
Ego
Good.
ego o. Is that
There we
right?
go.
Ego
Yep.
o manabitai.
Nice. Very nicely
Okay.
done, Iman. Well done. Well done.
So
Yes.
what would you say in return?
So in return, I would say, ja, ishoni manabimashou. So it's like, okay, let's learn together.
Awesome. I'm
Nicely
gonna
done.
practice the haji. Hold on, hajime mashite until I become fluent at it. Until I can say it without sounding like a
Sounds
Japanese
good.
robot. All
Yes.
right, before we call it a night, just real
Mhm.
quick,
Sure.
Haley's got a couple of questions more for you. So she says, now you make me wonder if they improved Google Translate for Japanese language. Do you have any idea? Oh, do you have any idea if they did?
I'm not sure. I know, of course, other programs such as DeepL, which is one that's really good for translating. I think but
Mhm.
yeah, of course, obviously, it's always going to miss a bit of the human touch because there's such subtleties to language, as we know, because it's not just the words; it's
Mhm.
other deep meanings, cultural meanings as
Yeah,
well. So
yeah.
that even the best mechanical translator, I don't think, can capture. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Same thing for Bahasa as well. There are times even when I
sure.
need to translate something and then I realize, nope, that's not what I want. So I have to find other resources to really go. I have to go through the context of what I want to say and then find what it might mean or what it might sound like in my native language because Google Translate cannot really capture all of the essence of context of what we want to say. Yeah. And Haley's got another question for you. What's the most complicated word you've had to teach the Japanese, or rather, what was complicated to them?
That's
I'm loving the
that's a
questions,
good
Haley.
that's a good question. Hmm. You know, in terms of pronunciation, I would say my last name was tricky.
How did they say
Because,
your last name?
well, it's tricky, and the reason is, and it's understandably so, because when you see it, how it's written, right, McGraw, the pronunciation McGraw is not something that's kind of intuitive
Yeah.
in terms of spelling. So
Uh-huh.
John was very easy. John,
Yeah.
John was easy, but and for me, I had to figure out, okay, well, what's an easy way to pronounce it? For example, if speaking in Japanese, because there's a different syllabary there. So
Hmm.
I experimented with different things like makuguro or maguro or maguro,
Oh
and it all depends on
wow.
the yeah, and all depends on the characters. And I'm speaking, of course, um, when I'm having in a Japanese conversation
Yeah. Yeah.
as opposed to English. But I think once they understood, okay, so the C is silent and it's just McGraw. With some practice, they could get that. That's the one that comes to mind, at least.
How would they then say McDonald's?
Ah, okay. Well, that's interesting. So it depends what part of Japan you're in. So
Okay.
uh, now the full name, and this is how it's sort of written in the syllabary, would be Makudonarudo, right?
Okay.
Makudonarudo.
Very
Um,
interesting.
Now, many times, I think in the eastern portion, Kanto, which is around Tokyo, many times it's
Mhm.
just abbreviated to Maku, and so
Okay.
Maku. But I think in the western portion around Kansai, which includes Osaka, I think it's Makudo.
Right.
So yeah,
It
many
differs.
yeah, and many times this is, of course, quite common in Japanese, reductions of loan words
Yeah.
and combinations, and of course you can see this, for example, in words like cosplay,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Which of course has now become a word that's used all around the world in English.
Even in
It was
English.
came from costume play, cosplay, change it,
Yeah.
and now it's come back to cosplay, and
Yeah.
that's an
And
interesting
it's even
thing.
used in the US. It's used
Yeah.
anywhere for costume plays. It's cosplay everywhere.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And it just shows that influence of how different languages feed and influence each other and so on, and can
Yeah.
go back and forth, right?
I love that.
Yeah,
I love that.
yeah,
Yeah, what you said, that language can influence one another. Yes. Love that.
absolutely.
Do you
Hmm.
know what Malaysians say McDonald's as?
I'm curious.
We just say McD.
McD? Okay.
Just the Mac and the D. Arnold's goes missing.
Sure. Works.
Ronald McDonald's is not in the picture anymore. It just goes, you want McD? What do you want from McD? Let's go to McD. So no, but I don't think I've heard anybody actually say McDonald's in the longest time.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, Haley is giving it a shot. So
Oh,
she's saying to
nice.
you, Hajime mashite John, watashi wa Haley desu. Yoroshiku onegai shimasu. So I'm saying that on your behalf, Haley. I hope I did you justice.
Yoroshiku onegaishimasu. Nicely
Right?
done. Well done, Hale.
So Atika Susmani saying hebat lah Haley. Hebat basically means like awesome, like wow, like you're really
Nice.
good. So it's hebat.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yep. Atika says I can sing Doraemon song only. Yeah, I think
Oh,
me too. The
I don't
Doraemon
know if
song
you know
is
that.
Japanese, right?
I know Doraemon, but I don't know the Doraemon song.
Okay, it's in
Maybe you should
Japanese.
sing it. Can you sing it for us?
I I don't remember it anymore. I know that there's a cat and a mouse somewhere
Uh,
in the song, but I don't remember it anymore. And Haley says your last name could either end up being a fish or Makudo. Yeah,
yes,
yeah,
because maguro
yeah,
is tuna as well as Japan, so it's tricky. So I also had to be
yeah.
conscious of that when I was explaining. Okay, so I can't say maguro because then it's going to sound like tuna. So I have to pick
Right.
something else, right? Okay, so that was part of the other trick. Okay, well, what do I pick? How to say my name in Japanese? So I often just went by John. It was just
Yeah,
safer
yeah,
that
and
way.
because that's what they're more familiar with as well, and it's easy for them to say.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
Netflix says "Gambate, John,"
Ah, thank you. Ganbatte. I
and
will
we're
hang in
gonna
there.
end going through the comments with Haley's. Yes, you did. MACD. Yep, yep, and yeah, sometimes it's even spelled like that way. It's spelled that way. Like if
Ah,
you text, you want to go to MACD, it's actually spelled MEKDI.
okay.
Yeah,
Nice.
that's how it's changed from McDonald's to MACD to MACD spelled that way.
I love it, or I should say, I'm loving it. The change there.
That's awesome.
That's great.
Um, Thank you so much, John. Thank you so
Wow.
much for everything that you've shared, for the wisdom that you have given us, for showing us how the Japanese are no longer closed, how much they are now open to accepting and embracing the language of the world because they see how it's important and they want their people to be part of that success, that
Yes.
worldwide success, and not just stay cooped in the Japanese bubble, like only speak Japanese, only know Japanese, only write in Japanese, and that they are working on transforming their workforce, taking them to the next level. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you ever so much.
Yes.
My personal hope is that my viewers, especially for those who have always believed that the Japanese, why can't we be like the Japanese and just use our native language? Guys, that's not the case anymore. The world has changed, technology has advanced, the Japanese have also advanced, and it's high time we do too. It
Absolutely.
is. Right. Thank you once again, John. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in, for your comments, for your questions. Everyone, you've been amazing. Until I see you again on the sixth episode happening soon, hopefully, I bid everybody good night. Have a good evening. Bye bye.
Good evening. Bye bye, everybody.